Hi everybody, welcome to another makeover, and in today's video I'm going to be transforming this beautiful mid-century modern dresser. I picked up this dresser about 6 months ago and it's been buried in my furniture stash, and I was so glad to start working with this one finally. There is 2 or 3 big scratches, but it's in really good shape. It was made by Canadian company Wireless, and they made furniture out of solid maple. This dresser is solid wood as well. It looks like cherry, but it is actually solid maple. And you can see that on the back panel. This dresser called Mr. and Mrs. Dresser, I guess there was a pair of them, and it says cherry maple. And some people ask me why would they cover solid wood? That's because those pieces were made out of cheaper pieces of maple. Sometimes they even use some scrap pieces and they glued them together and made furniture out of them. But cherry or walnut, they are more expensive pieces, so they were trying to make cheaper pieces of furniture looking more expensive. But anyways, this piece is a solid maple and I'm gonna keep it that way. I removed the hardware and I started removing the finish, and as you can see I was scraping, but that finish was so thick and it looked kind of like plasticky when I scraped it. There were some thin spots. I guess when they sprayed the finish they didn't spray it evenly, but the most of the top finish was super thick and super hard to scrape. So I took my stripper out. And if you saw my thumbnail, you already know what's gonna happen next. I poured good amount of stripper and I spread it all over the top, and usually it starts working right away, but not with this finish. So I let it sit for about 15 minutes. And then I came back with my brush and I started moving the stripper because there were some dry spots and there were some spots with a lot of stripper on them. So I wanted to make them even, because when you strip furniture, you don't want to let the stripper dry. And then I started noticing those flakes and I didn't realize it was a stripper first. I thought maybe there's a piece of paper get stuck to my brush. And when I started removing it with my putty knife, I couldn't believe that. My stripper had curdled. And I don't know what kind of finish was on this dresser, but there was some type of chemical reaction with the stripper. It didn't strip anything at all. I had to come back to the scraping or sanding. The only thing my stripper did, it softened the top coat so it was easier to scrape. I think that top coat was some type of polyurethane, and maybe they applied like 6 or 7 coats of it. Because while I was scraping it, I had that feeling like I was scraping plastic. That is how the top looked like after I did my best with the scraping, and I went to some sanding. I started with 100 grit sandpaper and then I went to 120 and 180. That's how the top looks after 180 grit sandpaper, and there was some discoloration. It is hard to catch it on camera, but it's there. That's why I'm using an oxalic acid. Oxalic acid is a wood bleach. You need to dissolve it in hot water in 1:10 ratio. It usually helps to get rid of the stain or the watermarks, or it helps with some discoloration like I have in this case. And it's better to apply an oxalic acid solution to the whole surface, not just to the spots with the stain or some discoloration, because that's a bleach and it's gonna bleach out those spots, and those areas would become lighter and you would get yourself even in the worst situation. Sometimes the oxalic acid starts working right away and you don't have to wait until it dries. In that case, you can deactivate it with the baking soda solution. You just mix the baking soda and the hot water in 1:10 ratio and you're good to go. But in my case, it didn't happen, so I let it completely dry and then I rinsed it with warm water. In my experience, you don't need more than 2 coats of oxalic acid, because with the 3rd coat, it's not going to work better. And honestly, in most of my furniture flipping cases, even the 2nd coat didn't work, didn't help. But anyways, you can try it yourself and maybe it's gonna work different way for you. With this dresser, it worked, but there were still some yellowish spots. Like I said before, the manufacturer didn't use the perfect pieces of the maple for this dresser, because they knew they were gonna make it look like cherry. While my top was drying, I sanded the sides of the dresser and the drawers. With the sides, I didn't have to use a scraper because the top coat was much thicker on the sides. And same thing about the drawers. I started sanding with 120 grit sandpaper and then I went to 180 and then to 220. To sand those wave-shaped drawers, I used the foam pad for my orbital sander. And for those drawers, I did some hand sanding because I didn't want to have any swivel marks. So yeah, I sanded by hand with 180 and 220 grit sandpaper. There was a little scratch on one of the sides and I filled it up with some wood filler. I mentioned before that there were two main scratches on the dresser. One of them was on the top of the dresser and the other one on the side. And I used my iron to try to steam them out. That trick usually works very good on solid wood. It works with the veneer as well if the scratch is not so deep. You want to put the damp cloth over the scratch and then you steam it out. The water from the damp cloth goes into the wood fiber and kind of raises the wood fiber. That's how it works. It was hard to see that scratch on the top, but on the side it's super visible. And you can see like after steaming it, it's kind of getting smaller and smaller. But this scratch was so deep, so I couldn't completely get rid of it. I had to just live with that. And then I sanded the top and the side with 220 grit. And even if that's solid wood, you can't sand the one spot with a scratch because you risk to create a hole. I mean, you're not gonna sand through the piece of wood, but the surface won't be even. To be able to sand the base, I had to take it off. And don't ask me why I'm doing it with my mask on, I don't know. I was probably so into the project, so I just forgot about it. I sanded the face part of the dresser and I was trying to sand it inside, but it was taking so much time, so I gave up. I decided to paint it. But before painting, I sealed those parts with some shellac to prevent a bleed through situation. And while shellac was drying, I applied some finishing wax to the frame of the dresser. And it's not a clear wax, it's a white wax from Michaels. I've been having it for a while and I didn't have a chance to try it on the piece of furniture. This wax you have to apply, then wipe off an excess, then let it dry for 24 hours and buff it. I like this product, but I think it's convenient to use this product on small pieces like the base or legs. Even with the drawers it worked fine. But for me it was kind of challenging to work with this wax on bigger surfaces, like the top of the dresser. But again, maybe it's just me, maybe I did something wrong because it was my first time working with this product. And you can see how this product changes the look of the drawers from yellowish side to the white side. It's like a whitewash. So will I use this product again? Yes, I definitely will. And here's again, you can see why the manufacturer hid this wood, actual wood, underneath the cherry-ish glazing. It's because it has some imperfections, like those black lines. And it's a top drawer. But for me, it doesn't really matter. It adds some character to the dresser. Once the coat of shellac dried, I applied 3 coats of Fusion Mineral Paint in the color limestone. And as you can see, I didn't tape the whole dresser, just the bottom part, because it's harder to sand it if the paint gets there. And honestly, I hate taping, so it was just easier to sand the excess of paint from the other parts. And finally, it was the time to apply the white wax to the body of my dresser. And with the top, I had to work in section with the wax, and it was the hardest part because this wax dries so fast, and while you're working with the next section, you're kind of messing with the previous one, and it's kind of hard to get an even application. And when I was trying to wipe it off, and if I touched the previous application, in some spots the wax came off. You can't see it on video, but trust me, it's there. And again, maybe it's just me because I didn't work with this product before. But anyways, I ended up applying 2 coats of white wax. I let the wax dry for 24 hours, but I still had that feeling that it wasn't enough to protect the piece. So I decided to apply an additional top coat. I used the Black Forest Monocoat finishing oil, and I don't know if it was such a good idea because waxed wood didn't want to absorb the finishing oil. But anyways, I started it, so I had to keep going. I decided to use my orbital sander and white pad to apply the top coat to the top of the dresser, and that was not a good idea. I was applying the top coat, and at the same time I was kind of wiping off the white wax. Not all the white wax, but in some spots you can see it's kind of like bleed through spots. But at the end it wasn't so bad, just a couple spots, and I had to fix them. I reapplied some white wax to those spots and I let them cure for the next 8 hours. While my top coat was curing, I kept working with the legs. I cleaned those brass caps off camera with the barkeeper's friend, and to clean the metal glides I used my drill and some sandpaper. And the next day I was ready to put my dresser together. And if you made that far and you like that type of content, it would mean a lot to me if you give this video a thumb up and you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss my new videos. The final step is to put the hardware back, and we're almost ready to see the final result. Let me remind you how this dresser looked before, and here's how it looks now.